Hey guys, it's Pete from Pete from Anxiety here. Welcome in today's episode. I appreciate y'all being here so much. Let's talk about a few things real quick. The Pete vs. Anxiety Team Anxiety Facebook group. Are you a part of it? You're not? What are you waiting for? The link's down here in the description down below, or go to Facebook and search Pete vs. Anxiety. Then look for the Team Anxiety Team page and join it today. Why not? You can join and help. It'll be great. Yeah, like right now. Hurry up. Stop what you're doing, pause this video, go do it right now. But anyways, let's also talk about the Pete vs. Anxiety YouTube page. If you're here right now, you're probably following it most likely. If not, head on over there, subscribe, be sure to like and comment on the videos and let me know, because all that stuff really helps, guys. I really appreciate it. And help me break the stigma that mental health is talked about enough. But anyways, guys, let's get in today's episode. I'll have a great one. Thank you so much again. And as I always say, don't ask how your day is, ask how your mental health is today. Guys, welcome to another exciting episode of Pete vs. Anxiety here on the Oracle Talk Radio Network. My guest today is a psychotherapist from New York City, the one, the only Karen. How you doing, Karen?
Good. How are you? Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you so much for coming. I know Karen reached out to me beyond the show, so we said, heck yeah, let's bring her on. Why not? So, Karen, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I'm a psychotherapist in New York City. I'm also approved to do telehealth in Florida. And I also have a life coaching business, so I could work with people in the other states. And basically, my background is in complex PTSD and helping people overcome those early childhood traumas that are carrying them into adulthood.
That's awesome, though. I mean, even I know CPTSD is not a lot, it's not really known to many people. Do you want to explain what that is exactly?
Sure. So everybody seems to know what PTSD is, right? They're an
Yeah.
active war, a car accident, Hurricane Sandy, 9/11. Those are all really big traumatic events. Complex PTSD is a little bit more nuanced than that. So it could be physical, sexual, emotional abuse that we encounter as kids, or the more nuanced part of it can be where our needs were not repeatedly met when we were kids. So, for instance, babies who cried it out and were left in a crib to cry it out and cry themselves to sleep, that child might internalize messages that they're not loved, they're not good enough, nobody's going to meet their needs, nobody's going to care for them. And even from those young ages, they could carry that with them into adulthood. And epigenetics has taught us that even if a woman is pregnant with a baby and has a traumatic event, the results of that trauma can be passed down to that baby, and then that baby carries that trauma into their adulthood. So, complex PTSD, it's very complex. It's usually in the relationships, and it causes long term effects that carry into our adult relationships. And it could cause anxiety, depression, hypervigilance, different types of attachment styles. It just is very nuanced and all encompassing.
Yeah. And that's true though. I mean, just in its name alone, it's complex alone, and the definition, and I don't think people realize that kids are 4 understand a lot more than they do, and I think it's very interesting. So let me ask you though, what got you into psychotherapy? I mean, because a lot of times it's always interesting to hear people's stories. So I'm curious that what got you into this field itself.
So, interesting. I was, first of all, always that kid who got in trouble for talking in school. I could not do math. 1 + 1 = 2. That's the extent of my math skills. Anything above that, it's too complex. And I was always talking to people, and the teachers used to tell my parents, and I always got in trouble. We would put her next to the quietest person in class, and then she gets them talking. And one teacher told my parents, if we put her next to a wall, the wall's going to start answering her. So I always had the gift to engage with people. I always had that. I won Chatterbox Awards in summer camp, all this stuff. But more importantly than that, I was the victim of childhood bullying, and I had my own stuff going on within my own family that I know as an adult and I know as a psychotherapist, my parents may not have meant for those things to happen, but the messages were internalized.
Yeah.
And so when I was in college, I changed my major so many times, and I was not doing well in college. And my parents were like, you either get out or you go to therapy, one or the other. And I said, all right, I'll go to therapy. And my therapist was really instrumental in getting me back on the ball in college. And literally, the way we did that is we entered into a contract with my parents, and it was okay. I'm going to go and take 2 classes. I had to pull an A in both of those classes. And if I got an A in both of those classes, my parents would continue to pay for the next semester. And we did that. And I started off slow and I engaged in the classes. And then when I was trying to decide on a major, I was like, well, I could sit and talk to people all day. I already know I could talk to people all day. That's really easy for me. And so I started looking into what does it take to become a therapist? What kind of degree do I need? What kind of licensing do I need? And
Yeah.
through my college process, I started that. And interestingly enough, now I know now that I also have ADHD on top of this childhood trauma. So going into something that really interested me and really excited me really helped keep me motivated throughout the rest of college in order for me to really want to do well in my classes.
Yeah, no, I get that completely.
Mhm.
I really, I can agree with the bullying thing. I've been bullied before. I know what it's like. It's horrible,
Yeah.
and stuff like that too. But I think it's so interesting to hear people's stories about how they get there. And I mean that in itself makes sense though, because you're something you're very interested in, you
Yeah.
know, and things like that. I do know some of the notes that you were sending me though. I do. One thing that really caught my attention was
Mhm.
negative self-talk. It's funny you bring that up in that subject because there's a guest that we had on the show named Betsy Holmberg, and we went back and forth for an hour just on that topic alone. So I know, a lot of people know don't really realize what negative self talk is. I think a lot of people don't realize that in their internal dialogue that they have is what we're talking about, that kind of thing. So I know it changes the way people look at themselves, because we say we're our harshest critic, you know what I'm saying? Do you have tips for somebody that has really bad habits of negative self-talk?
Absolutely. So I deal with this all the time with my clients because oftentimes they'll come in, and usually most people start therapy saying that they feel anxious or they feel depressed. And then when we start peeling back the layers and
Yeah.
looking at where is that coming from, oftentimes people have these negative self-talk messages that are on a loop in their head. And the loop is usually around themes of I'm not good enough, I'm
Mhm.
not smart enough, I'm unlovable, and that message of never being enough. And when we really, one of the questions I always ask people is, when was the first time you remember having that conversation in your head of I'm not good enough? Like when was the first time you had that? And it often goes back to adolescence, early adulthood, somewhere in there. And it's like, well, where in that childhood or teenage years or young adult life could you have done something or something could have happened that gave you that message? And oftentimes it's from childhood bullies or
Mhm.
negative messaging from their parents. And then when we pull that apart even more, my question to them is, what is that based on? And it's often based on the parents' experiences or the bullies'
Yeah.
experiences. So what's really happening is these important people like the childhood bully is putting this on us and we're internalizing it. So then I ask people, my clients, what do you want to believe about yourself? What like, make a list of all the things that you're grateful for and what positive do you want to carry forward? And we look at all the different ways in their lives that they've been successful and they've met that positive messaging. And then we work together to bring that positive messaging going forward. Leave the negative stuff behind.
Yeah. I mean, that's very true though. Think about it. It is in your head. It floats around, especially when you have anxiety. It takes off at an amazing pace. I can tell you that much from my own experience. And a lot of times, it's interesting because I think suicidal ideation and negative self talk kind of play in hand a little bit if you think about it, because uh, I am not feeling good. I'm not worthy enough. All those things are things that people say when they're thinking about those kind of things. Am I not correct for going that route though?
Well, people, you're 100% right in what you're saying. That does lead up to suicidal ideation and things like that. And that's why we want people to reach out. We
Yeah.
want people to feel connected because that's also a big part of that, not feeling connected,
Yeah.
whether to a partner, a therapist, a friend, or not feeling connected in the universe at all. And so we really want to help people through that. And the other interesting thing is that it takes just as much energy to believe those negative thoughts as it does to believe the positive. People constantly are striving for happiness. I want to be happy. I want to be happy. Happy is an emotion just like disappointment, frustration, anxiety, depression. It comes and goes and it ebbs and flow. What we want for people is a level of contentness. And that's, my life may not be perfect or Instagram perfect, but I have all these other great things that I'm thankful for. And there's a couple of areas I want to work on. What can I do today to work on those other little areas? And
Yeah.
if we could balance life that way, it's not so overwhelming with all these negative thoughts that we have.
I think that Instagram is going to segue into my next thing. I don't know if
Mhm.
you've seen these videos for Men's Mental Health Month that have been going around about these people and these women in particular are saying that there's no month for women and everything else, and the statistics are there that men are dying at an alarming rate at 80%.
Mhm.
And we make up 50% of the population, which is scary because 80% of us, you don't know which one of your friends isn't going to be there the next day. And I think
Absolutely.
it's great when you say Instagram because that's where I see the video. It came across this woman having a celebration, talking about when people say stay silent for Men's Mental Health Month. And it's I just don't get it. I don't get what the deal is here all of a sudden. It's like men don't talk about it for that reason. That's a prime example. If you think about it, me as a man, I can tell you that's why a lot of us don't talk about it. It's just stuff like that. And then there was this younger girl. I don't know where this girl got her information from, but she was just saying some very, very disheartening things. And she's like, well, there doesn't need to be a whole month for men's mental health. They're just looking for attention. I'm like, yeah, that's right. We're looking for attention, but we don't talk about it versus,
Wow.
what I'm saying? Like it's just crazy because now social media has given this new open-ended area where people can post stuff like that. And then it's going to go viral for good ways or bad ways, but it's going to go viral, which that woman's did. She's nowhere to be found on the internet to date now after a lot of people have said the updates and things like that. But it has to be very disheartening for you though when you have to see that kind of stuff because it sends the wrong message. Am I not correct?
Absolutely. So that's part of why I wanted to come on your podcast because it is so important for men to engage with a therapist. That's just the bottom line. Not enough men in our society are engaging in therapy. And I talk about this all the time, men, and I mean boys, are socialized to only feel angry and aggression. Those are the only two emotions that boys are socialized to have. If they start crying because they lost a soccer game or they're frustrated with their friends in class, whatever it is, our message to the boys usually is something along the lines of "suck it up, buttercup," and
Mm-hmm.
that is
Mm-hmm.
so damaging, and we know that now. So, Men's Mental Health Month is so important because men need to learn. And a lot of my work with men is what are you feeling? What's the emotion you're feeling? And so many will come in and say, I'm angry. And it's like, but what's under the anger? Under the anger, there's all this other stuff. And a lot of men have a hard time using the words to say, I feel disappointed. I feel like I'm not good enough. I feel unloved. They don't have that vocabulary. So, a large part of my work with men is really looking at what's under that anger and how do we label those emotions. Once we get that moving, then everything else, like their partners will be like, oh my God, like you're really opening up. You're really able to express yourself now because now we have language to put towards how we're feeling. And the other thing that I do with men more so than some of my other therapeutic techniques is I concentrate on what's the sensation in your body that you're feeling? Because oftentimes men will feel their muscles get tight, they'll feel their shortness of breath. But again, they can't say that's my frustration happening. They can't say that's my disappointment. And when men tense up like that, that's why they go, I must be angry. We don't have a society of angry men. We have a society of men who don't have the proper language. And Men's Mental Health Month, we need men to be in therapy in order to learn what are you feeling and then how do you manage those feelings? How do you manage it in your relationship? How do you manage it for yourself? How do you bring down the depression levels so that we don't have men committing suicide? It's just rampant, the amount of need. And honestly, I'll be honest with you, I've seen therapists say they won't work with men. And I'm mind blown when I see that. I'm like, how do you not work with men? Like, we need to help the men in our society. It's just a very unbalanced way right now.
Yeah, yeah. The stats aren't lying though. I mean, 80% a year, 600,000 give or take, it's just it's insane. It's like when you hear somebody say that, it's like, is what are you doing then? Why are you in this field if you're not looking to help everybody? I mean, I get
Exactly.
I get some guests that are like, well, I specialize more men than I specialize in women. And I get that sometimes their approach is better for each sex,
Mhm.
and that's, I could respect that completely, but I feel like people that say they just don't talk to men in general, it's just scary because at the alarming rate and the amount of the population they make up, we're losing them even quicker than we can keep them. And
And no, sorry, go ahead.
no, good. No, you go ahead, Karen. You're good. Go
when
for it.
when when I see therapists say things like that, I'm like, I hope you have a good referral network. Like, if a man contacts you, you need to refer them out and link them to someone who can work with them,
Yeah.
because we cannot be turning men away from mental health services.
Yeah.
And so many different things, like boys are diagnosed at a higher rate as boys with ADHD.
Hmm.
And so, like, what are we doing with them? How are we helping them? How are we helping them into maturity to manage the ADHD? How are we helping them with their anxiety? How depression is so rampant in men. How are we helping them with that? So it's just mind blowing to me when I see therapists who don't want to work with men or people who are out there saying this doesn't matter. It is so important.
It is, and I think the scary part and the fact that me and one of my guests on Monday, we talked about this actually. He said that ever since the conception of social media, I don't remember the exact percentage. I think he said 20% of suicides in young boys went up from that, when we're up 20% because of social media alone.
Yeah.
And it's like we need to start talking to these kids sooner, and I think that it's scary that we're losing them so young. And
Mhm.
in fact, there's a young man that the other day who's 18 years old that I just found out through my wife, a friend of her daughter, basically, her younger sister had basically known this kid. He made good money, things like that. Was like a bull roper kind of thing. Did a lot of that stuff. He ended up taking his life. He shot himself in the face with I think a 45 gauge shotgun. She said,
Oh my God.
and it's crazy because when you hear that, it's like, whoa, hold on. He's 18 years old. He just took his life, and then you hear the next after effect is, oh well, I could have done more. I honestly, I don't know if you could have done more. We don't know that he was struggling. No one knew.
Right. And
Everyone's home.
it's hidden. Men mask their depression just like women mask their ADHD or autism. Like, it's masked. And when that happens, we don't know what's going on. That's why we need to encourage men across the lifespan. Honestly, I was on someone else's podcast and somebody asked me, when should people get mental health counseling? From the time you acquire language to the time that we stop breathing, we need to be in therapy. It's all about getting the support that we need. It
Yeah.
doesn't even have to be to treat depression, to treat anxiety. It can be, I just want someone else to listen to me. I want someone else who's objective to be like, yeah, you're on the right path, or maybe look at it this way. It's just supportive counseling, and there's nothing wrong with that. And more people need to access it across the board, especially young boys, teenage boys. There's so much pressure on them these days.
Hmm.
We just need to support them more. And schools for that age group are not doing enough in this. That's another whole system failure when it comes to the schools and mental health. They're not doing enough. They don't have the right credentials in the
Yeah.
school systems in order to help these kids. And that's another whole
Oh no, I agree. I agree with you
world.
there. It's scary that we know these are the problems, but we don't address the issue. It's funny because all these shootings that happen where the kids are bullied and things like that, then they want to blame mental health, and it's, oh, we're quick to blame mental health, but then, oh, we're not going to deal with the problem. We're going to sweep that under the rug. No, no, no. We're going to worry about guns, the inanimate object in the equation that didn't
Right.
do anything on its own, doesn't have a mind of its own, but we're
I
going to
am
blame that.
I am so glad you said that, because I look at those school shootings as they happen, and in my like non-research area, every single one that I see, it's usually men who are engaging young boys, teenage boys who were involved in those shootings.
Yeah.
And when you look at that, and it's like, because they're not getting mental health treatment. And I say that all the time. And people come at me, no, it's the guns, it's the gun. No, it's mental health treatment. If they were getting support, if they had someone to listen to them, they would have coping skills and other outlets. And the other thing is, and I hate to say this, again, the schools don't do enough. When a kid comes in and says, I'm being bullied, and then it's like, oh, well, they have the right to confidentiality and we can't tell you how we discipline them. Well, to the kid who's being bullied, it looks like nothing's happening.
Yeah.
There's no consequences. So they take their own agency and they go and do these acts, and then we look at them like, well, what's wrong with you that you did that? Well, what's wrong with our school system that we're not stopping these bullies?
Yeah.
What's happening there? So yeah, it's all linked together, and we're just failing.
No, I agree 100% with you. I think that there's not enough being done about bullying. I think that, some of these, if you watch some of these younger movies like Dazed and Confused, how they were paddling all the kids and stuff like that, they thought that was okay then, but now it's like it's getting to the point that these kids are getting pushed to the edge where they feel like either A, they're going to commit suicide, or B, they're going to commit a violent action, and they're going to take it out on the people that were doing that to them. Like Columbine it was the biggest one first right off the
Mhm.
bat. That one was horrific. I actually had a guest on the show that was in the library about 6 feet away from one of the shooters. And the situation was just, she said, I could see the whites of their eyes. And I'm just like, oh my God, really? And I didn't know this prior to the conversation we were having. She just brought it up. It's like, yeah, I'm in the library. And I'm like, oh God, please don't get out in front of that goddamn table, whatever you do, and it's just like, if you look at like the example of Tennessee where the kid was given the gun, even though the parents knew he had bad intentions.
Mhm.
It's like, what the hell is going on with these people? Why are we doing these things? It's like, you want to blame guns, but it's not. It's an inanimate object. Let's think about it. It doesn't breathe. It doesn't have its own thought process. It's not human. It has no emotions. You can't blame an inanimate object. It's like blaming my car for running over somebody. Well, you're the one driving the car. How do you think it got there? Kind of thing, And it's so absent-minded mentality of just like nobody wants to take responsibility for anything. And I think that, when it comes to these school shootings, it's just hard to watch, man. It's like these
Yeah.
poor kids, like Sandy Hook, where all those poor kids were
Yeah.
gone.
The
It's like,
6-year-olds.
you know what I mean? It's just insane. It's like, what the hell is going on in the world that we can't seem to do it? And on the other hand, it's hard to find mental health care for a lot of people because it costs so much.
Yes.
It's crazy, but it's like we don't want to solve the problem. We want to just keep saying, okay, we know it's an issue. Let's keep brushing it under the rug. Let's go blame the other item, and the inanimate object in the group. It's fault. I'm like, yeah. So let's blame a gun. Okay, let's look at it. The gun had its own thought process. Like the Terminator decided to come do its own thing. No, get out of here. That's stupid.
Right. And it's all tied together, because as you're talking about getting the mental health and the costs involved in that, that's another whole system that's
Hmm.
broke, because the insurance companies make it really, really hard for therapists to do the work that we want to do. We're limited by sessions, we're limited by time in the session. So 45 minutes versus 60 minutes, or just if a client needs more support and we spend an hour and a half. And so, like, how do you manage that broken system with mental health? And then the other part of this is, like, when like that instance in Tennessee that you were talking about, the parents knew, but if the kid is over a certain age, you can't mandate them into treatment. So that's another whole realm of this. Even with the Sandy Hook shooter, they know that that kid had issues. They knew that there was mental health stuff, but you can't mandate people into treatment after a certain age. So it's just it's all a big intertwined ball of thread, and how do you pull one thread and not another one fall short? It's really a complicated mess in our mental health system.
Yeah, it is. It's really scary that, you want us to carry insurance, but then you make it harder for us to get these things where we need help. And then you want to blame this problem, but then again, we can't get the help because it costs so much, or it's hard to get, or your insurance doesn't cover enough of it, or you're not in network, and all these other, things that just don't make any sense. It's like, when is it going to be enough for people to finally start saying, okay, well, that's enough. Now we need to start doing some of this problem. And it's just getting to the point of just ridiculousness, with the numbers just continuing rising of all these different things that you see go on, and it's scary because I'm afraid what it's going to be like in 20 years. Like how bad is it going to be? Because we're going to be like Mad Max out there, and things just going that bad to that point where it's just like, it's just going to be running rampant, and people are going to be like, oh, well, we could have solved this problem a long time ago. Yeah, we could have, but you all decided not to address the issue.
Right. Right. And that's why now it's so important to get the younger generation into therapy and
Mm-hmm.
use to accessing that service and teaching our kids, especially those teenagers, how do you access services? How do you get the help that you need? Where do you reach out? It's just starting young and making it normalized that it's okay to go talk to somebody.
Yeah.
And that starts in the schools, having more counselors available in the schools so that any kid can walk in at any time and be like, hey, I need help today. And not waiting for someone to come, oh, I have to go run to this meeting. I gotta go. No, having someone always available for these kids.
Yeah, yeah, I know, I agree. I think it's a need now, and it's
Mhm.
something we need to demand as parents. It's like, hey, these kids need help. Let's get them the help now. Let's stop the bullying and all these other things that continue happening. Because one of my daughters was going through that too, and like when I went to the school, I tried to call and talk to the principal. Of course, couldn't get a hold of that person. They were just too
Yeah,
busy. So I
yeah.
ended up getting to one of the assistant principals, whatever, and I literally told the woman just get out of there because I was pissed. I was like, you didn't want to take my call, so you can't be a part of this conversation. You need to exit,
Yeah.
basically, in a nice way of what I said. That's not what I said in the moment. Now, I was highly upset. This guy, the gentleman I talked to, was very understanding. He understood exactly where I was coming from. Being a single dad himself, he knew exactly everything going on. So it's just crazy because now they have all these cameras that see these things, and it's like, okay, well,
Mhm.
you're watching this on the camera, so what the hell
Right.
are you doing
Now, what
about
do
this
we do with
problem?
it? Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, oh, we're sending them to these other things. Okay, that's not working. This kid's continuing to do the same thing over and over again. He's going to send these hate messages on Snapchat to her and things like that and attacking her verbally. And it's like, she shouldn't have to go through that every single day. I
Not at
shouldn't have
all.
to have her come home and tell me, well, yeah, he started picking on me for whatever reason, or he said these things to me. And it's like, I just like, you want to kind of be like Malcolm in the Middle's mom. You just want to show up to school and just be like, hey, call that kid up. Like, yo, I heard you got a problem. But we can't do that. Let's think about it. Society, we can't do that in our society though, because they'll call the cops and the cops get involved and this and that. It's just like it's so fucking frustrating because it's like
Yeah.
I literally had to threaten to call friends that I've known that work for like ESPN and a couple other places. I'm like, I'll call in some favors and get this on the news within the next 20 minutes if you don't get some here. And that's what it took to get
Yep.
somebody to talk to me about these problems. And it's sad.
We had an incident in my son's school. It was a crazy year, very similar to that. There was bullying going on.
Yeah.
The police got involved, not just for my son. There was an incident with my son where he was in fifth grade. This was fifth graders, but there was an incident where a dad got involved and was encouraging his son to hit the bully, and it made the news. And from the incident with my son, and another family was involved, and then this incident that made the news, the cops called me up one day and they were like, what is happening in that class? And I was like, oh, let me tell you. I'll tell you exactly what's happening in that class. But the cops literally had to get involved at that point, and it was bad. It was not a fun year for my son or anyone in his class. So that's another why I keep saying the schools aren't doing enough to get counselors in the schools and qualified counselors, because that
Yeah.
is huge. They get these unlicensed people right out of school, and they're not getting the appropriate clinical supervision according to the state licensing of what we need for supervision in order to get fully licensed. And these young social workers, school counselors, they don't have enough experience to deal with
Yeah.
this stuff, and they're not being guided in the right way. So it's a whole systematic issue.
Yeah, it's a whole systematic breakdown, honestly, and
Mhm.
it's quite infuriating because when it comes to mental health, these kids picking on each other, saying these hateful things to each other. I always teach my kids the same thing. I always tell them the same thing. And I'm going to teach the other younger one now is that whatever you say to somebody, understand that could be the last thing you say to somebody. So think about what you say
Right.
because you don't know if that person's going to be here. And the scary statistic is if it's a male, we really don't know which how long he's going to be there, because if you break it down by like a group of people,
Mhm.
almost most of that group is going to be gone at 80%. Most of them are going to be gone. Maybe one or two will be left out of a group of maybe 10. You know what I'm saying? You don't know how many or when it's going to be their time to go or how they're going to go, kind of thing, and that's scary to say that we're at that point. Even young kids around, what is it, 10 to 12, I had Nicole Richardson on. She's actually a therapist here in Texas. She was telling me that the younger boys suicide rate has gone up even
Yeah.
more, and it's got jumped up. And I'm like, this is insanity, man.
Yeah.
Like we got to get these kids some help. We got to start talking to them sooner. Do you have any suggestions of like how, like as a parent, how you would talk to them? Just kind of bring it up to them, like, hey, listen, are
Always.
you okay? You know what I mean? Things like
Yeah.
that. Just things that way it could start the conversation. That way, it's not so awkward for parents, because that's going to be a hard conversation if your kid's talking about, well, I'm thinking about killing myself. You as a parent are going to feel like I'm a failure because this child's thinking this, but it may not even be anything you've done.
The best thing a parent can do, and this sounds crazy, and I tell clients this all the time, and they're like, no, that's too young as possible. We should start talking to our kids about stranger danger,
Hmm.
all those little things. Like it starts at 2, 3, 4 years old. And even when we're sitting down and we're watching Bluey or whatever the cartoons are these days that the kids are watching, those are all basically like situation comedies. So ask your kids, what do you think about that? What do you think about when that happened to that character? Like, how would you handle that? Would you come and talk to mom and dad? And just open up those lines of communication, because that's teaching your kids that you trust their judgment, or that you could have an open dialogue, and you're removing it from the personal and you're putting it into that cartoon character, whoever it is. And
Yeah.
that's how it starts. So that when they're in school, like kindergarten, and they come home and be like, little Johnny doesn't want to be my friends anymore because they're friends with this one. And now I feel sad. Now you have lines of communication open, and now
Right.
you could support your child. Be like, wow, that must be really hard. Like maybe the three of you could play together, and
Yeah.
offering up those different solutions. But it starts at that young age, keeping those lines of communications open, knowing your child. And in this day and age where moms are working, dads are working, everybody's out of the house, aftercare, like everyone's moving parts and everything else, it's hard to check in. I will tell you, I have 2 boys. The best conversations I have with my kids are in the car with the radio off. Those conversations can be anything from, how was school today? How was your math test? To, oh my God, I like this girl, but she likes this one, and whatever is going on in their lives. The car is a great way for us to connect and bond, and they tell me what's going on. And that could be going back and forth to the grocery store, that could be going back and forth to basketball practice, whatever it is. But having those conversations in the car with the radio off, and just giving them that attention during that time to be like, what's going on in your life? Talk to
Yeah.
me, because I want to be more involved and I want to help you. Even if you don't necessarily need help, but I want to hear about it, and just supporting them in that way.
Listen, okay, let's all be honest. We know what a teenager's conversation is like. Oh my God, so and so stopped talking to this person, and you got to keep track of who's friends with this
Yeah.
person. This person, you're not talking to this person for this reason. I'm just like, what? I don't understand what's going on right now. Like, because I raised 3 girls, and now they live with their mom because they're obviously young ladies now. And it was a lot to learn at first, man. Like I had to learn things that I didn't even think I'd have to learn. And with girls and boys, it's different because girls are more emotional about certain things. So my oldest was just flip the switch, dramatic about everything, and I'm just like, oh God, well, so and so doesn't want to talk to me anymore. I'm like, what the hell's going on here, man? I'm lost. Like it's like everything's changing so fast with her. I'm like, oh, how's it going? Well, so and so's not talking to this person, and I'm not talking to this person because this
Yeah.
reason, because she's a whore. I'm like, do you even know what those words are? I'm like, wait a minute, do you even know what any of these words mean? Like you're just saying these things, and then the music they're listening to, and it's
Yeah.
like, I feel like my mom at times, because like I'd yell at him about the music I'm listening to, but I'm like, yeah, I was the same way. I was listening to some stuff I probably shouldn't have been listening to at a young age, but it's all right, because you're trying to explain to your mom, like, oh, explicit, oh, this one doesn't have all that in there. You try to sell it to her, like, hey, I want this CD for Christmas, mom. Marilyn, I want this Marilyn Manson CD, just for an example. And she's just like, I don't know, my mom was never really in tune music. Like her thing was like Elton John, Billy Joel,
Yeah.
all those kind of things. My stepmom now, she was more in tune. She had the Who, she had the Ramones, Kiss, all these other things. She listened to a broad spectrum of things, so she knew what was on this. She knew fact from crap there, so you couldn't really sell her on a lot of that stuff. She was like, "No, I don't know. I've heard about this, And it's just like it's so scary because a lot of people blame music too. Like, oh, it's the music too, or it's
Mhm.
or it's the TV shows you're watching. I'm like,
Or the video games.
you know,
Mhm.
and I don't really think that's what it is. I think that you're desensitizing them if you really think about it,
Yeah.
because a lot of the violence, you know, early in the early 90s, they had this game called Manhunt. Okay. So, an example,
Yes.
Karen, you went around, and you basically did the most gruesome things to people,
Yeah.
stopping bags over the head, glass shards, and things. You know what I mean? The more intense it got, you know, it just got completely crazy. And it's like people are like, oh, well, now Call of Duty. It's like, you have no idea, man. The lobbies, the people that say things in line, like, you know, ever since you have given access to people to talk online in
Mhm.
those areas too, I think it's really scary too, because you don't know who's on the other side of that mic.
Yeah.
We had a situation, some friends, where her son was giving out her home address to a random person on Roadblocks,
Oh
and I
no.
was like, oh no, this is Roadblocks for kids. This is a game for kids.
Yeah.
And these predators have found a way to get in, and it's like, you know, you have to talk to them about that. Hey, listen, you know, so and so isn't who they may be, or, you know. And I had a situation myself in Minecraft. Was another one where this kid was like 22 in Colorado, clearly was not all there upstairs. You could tell he really wasn't there. He couldn't really, I didn't know the whole dynamic of what his situation was, but I could tell he clearly did understand that what he was doing was wrong. So, you know, it's like, it's the scary part is that he's messaging these kids, oh, I love you, and things like that. And these
Oh
kids are like
no.
13, 14. They don't know better than that. They don't know what those words mean. They know, like, my mom and dad say I love you to each other, or they
Yeah.
say love you to me. But this other person is telling me these things, or saying these very graphic things to me. I don't know how to handle these situations.
Right. And that's all part of it. Like limiting those video games, limiting the social media stuff for kids is so important. And really getting kids to get outside a little bit more. It's going to help their social skills. That goes back also to the stranger danger that I was talking about before. And having those conversations from when they're 2, 3 years old, all the way up now. My kids drive. And I'm like, be careful. Watch out for other people. Watch out for people who might be trying to cause an accident to get insurance money. It goes into that whole realm of having to warn them and help them learn all these different pitfalls.
Yeah,
Grooming
yeah.
is important to start having that dialogue of what does grooming look like?
Mm-hmm.
And especially if you have a special needs kid who has ADHD, autism, if you're a single parent, like predators prey off those dynamics because, you know, those kids, they don't know as much or they may
Yeah.
not be as aware and the parent isn't as involved. So those kind of situations put kids statistically at a higher danger range than kids who come from intact families and where, you know, they're more neurotypical.
Yeah, because a lot of those will lead to a lot of issues too, you know, like
Yeah.
PTSD for the kid, and that could lead to BTD too, technically. Yes, am
Yes.
I correct thinking right for that
Yes.
one?
Yeah.
You know, and it's things like that too. And it's scary that we have to tell them all these things, because when we were kids, you know, your parents pushed you out the door all day. You were gone all day
Yes.
outside. You know, now it's like you can't let them go 2 feet out from the front yard because you're afraid somebody's going to snatch them up,
Yeah.
or, you know, or something like that. And, or these games where these kids are just getting groomed by these older adults, like, you know, those Nickelodeon stars that were, the one guy that was getting in trouble for it, and then the guy from That 70s Show as well, the one that got a lot of hate, and everybody was like,
Yeah.
oh, why are you hating on him? Well, think about what he's doing. Okay, even Elvis Presley was doing this. Let's talk about that for a fact too. Everybody that's a big Elvis Presley fan, if you didn't know that what he was doing was grooming, I don't know what else to tell you. That was textbook right there, what he was doing to her. You know, and it was really weird because a lot of people didn't think of the problem with that at the time, obviously, because society was different then versus now, that we, you know, now we know these things. But basically that's what Elvis was doing, you know, and he was kind of narcissistic a little bit if you think about it,
Yeah.
because he's very controlling of what she could or couldn't do. You
Yeah.
know, and there's a lot of interesting things when you watch that documentary that came out about him, where she starts revealing all these weird things, that weird habits he had and things like that. And I was just like, oh my God, not Elvis. You know what I mean? Like we always knew Elvis as the icon for, you know, being different to everyone else. He was real flashy, did all the music, did all the weird movements and things like that. You know, because like Forrest Gump, you know,
Yeah.
Forrest technically interacts with Elvis Presley at one point. He's showing how to do the little shake and stuff with
Yeah.
his knees, you know, and it's like, I think that's the scary part with the internet now, is that, like, it's hard to police it for kids because we
Mhm.
don't know what they're watching. You see all these influencers talking about all these different things. Oh, you have to have all the greatest clothes, or men need to have all this money. And it's like, you're shaping these children mentally, in the wrong direction.
Absolutely.
And then they come across these videos like the men's mental health ones where it's like, well, they just shouldn't have their own month, or you're weak because you're a man because you're showing emotion. It's like, what are you teaching these young boys and young girls? You're teaching them the wrong message, because
Right.
now you're basically feeding them this crap, and then they're watching this crap, and it's like, and then everybody's like, oh well, I can't police it. Facebook's like, I shouldn't police it. Yeah, you should.
Yeah,
It's your site, man.
absolutely.
Take responsibility. Get the hell out of here.
Absolutely. And that's so important even for young girls. Young girls are under the same
Especially.
influence, boys and girls. And that's why it's so important to get the kids away from the phones, get them out, get them playing a sport, even if that means the parent goes outside with them for a little while and kicks around a soccer ball, takes them on a bike ride, spend time with kids that way, as opposed to just, oh, and babies as young as like a couple of months old are having phones in front of their faces. Get the phones out of the kids' hands, take them away. You get them like for school purposes, and that's it. Done.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that kids having cell phones at an early age is a very dangerous thing,
Yes.
because you never know how somebody's connected. Oh, what's your phone number? And these kids don't think
Yeah.
about these kind of things. Goes back to the Roblox story about the kid giving out the information. And I was like, hey, you might want to talk to your kid over here.
Yeah.
He's giving out your home address right now to some random person. And they're like, what are you doing? It's just like, I think yelling at them isn't a thing either. It's one of those bad things I picked up from one of my parents. My
Yeah.
dad would always yell and things like that. So like now my stepdaughter, or she's my daughter technically, either way. I don't flesh or blood, she's still mine. I still treat her like my own. But it's different with her versus my daughters. Like with her, tone of voice plays a big difference, when it comes to her, because she reacts really quick to it. So she's real sensitive to those kind of things. So you have to be very careful how you approach it with her.
Yes.
And we treat her like she's an adult almost, just with that, to the sense that we talk to her like, hey, listen, understand what I'm saying. Hey, look, look at me in the eye kind of thing, make eye contact really quick and understand what I'm saying to you. And then, it works out really well, and I know a lot of people like to knock that, but it's like, it's effective. Like you look at her, get her attention. Hey, listen, can you do me a favor? I need you to go get that right there. And, you direct them. She'll go pick it up, no problem, or do this, or she like, well, actually we were teaching her how to cook, so she knows how to cook eggs and everything else. And she's 4 years old. She's gonna be
Okay.
5 next month, so she already is learning some different skills, things like that. So we're teaching her these things at a younger age, so she can be more independent. But we're also teaching her, hey, listen, this is hot, that's cold, don't hey, there's this, there's that, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's we're trying to teach as much as we can. Try to keep her away from the TV as much. So, when she's home with me during the day, we're usually doing something. We're always hanging out, doing something. Some days, we'll watch a movie or here and there. I know Bluey is a really good one, actually. And it's funny you brought that one up, because I think Bluey's a really educational one now for like, how people feel and things like that. Because I think he really touches on all these kind of real world situations. Versus like some of this other stuff my kids are watching, they're younger, like Wow Wow Wubsy. Oh my God, if I had to watch that show ever again, I may scream. I promise you this much, because it was just like,
Yeah.
stop.
Some of
It
them
was
are painful to watch.
it wasn't as good as Fraggle Rock back in the day, like
I
I love,
love Fraggle Rock.
you know what I'm saying? Like I gotta break out the old school, but she does like Ninja Turtles though, so that kind of works out. So
There you go.
we'll watch Ninja Turtles. She's getting into the Power Rangers now. She threw whatever her new obsession is, the Power Rangers. So all these kind of things, But the idea is that we try to keep her away from a lot of these electronics as much as we can. We try and interact with her, and stuff like, and you can see the difference of how she reacts with me versus other people, because I'm always interacting with her. So she likes to call my name all the time. So you hear her shouting it across the room. Her mom could be sitting in the same room. Oh no, I'm the first person she's calling over there, because she's like, hey, listen, come over here.
Because
Like,
you're
oh,
giving her
okay.
that attention that she needs. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And when you're spending time, so many people, like I talk with women about the mental load that they carry and doing all the different things they do for the family. And when I say like your 3-4-year-olds can help you set the table for dinner at night, they're like, no, they can't. Why? They could carry plates, they could carry napkins, they could carry the salt and pepper to the table.
Yeah,
When
show
you
'em.
engage a child in cooking, in gardening, like getting one of those little herb gardens that you put out on your windowsill and planting different spices and how do you use those spices in food. Kids learn all that. They learn how
Yeah.
to nurture their bodies. And what they're also doing is getting away from the screens while they're
Yeah.
doing those kind of things. So the more you could include kids in different things like that, the better off they are. And they're going to learn that independence, because a parent's job, as hard as this is to make their kids independent so that when they get that, 18, 20-year-olds range. They could get out and get out on their own, as opposed to people who can't. They don't have the skills. They don't know how to do laundry. They don't know how to cook for themselves. And
Yeah.
they're so reliant on mom and dad into adulthood. Kids are not supposed to be dependent on us like they are today. They're supposed to be more independent.
Yeah, she likes to make her own eggs. She made cornbread last night on her own. Mom helped her all the way to the evening because mom uses like the cast iron and things. And was telling her, listen, look, you can see it's hot. You can hear it's hot. You know, here you go. Just kind of put your hand over a little bit, feel the heat. Okay, it's hot. All right. Well, you understand that's hot. What that means, it's hot. So, you know, she's really self-aware of a lot of those things too. She's really careful. She can crack eggs just like an adult.
Awesome.
It's crazy to watch her do it though. She just cracks it just like it's nothing, man. And I've seen kids older that can't even crack eggs like she can, you know, and it's really cool because you can teach her these things and there's life skills. And at the same time, she feels accomplished because she's like, yeah, all right, I did it. Yeah. And she's so excited to tell everybody about it. Oh yeah, I cooked eggs this morning or whatever, or, you know, whatever, you know, try to do more interactive things with her like that. Take her out to, you know, play the chalk and, you know, go to like the splash pad. That's what we're going to do after this interview. We're going to the splash pad, but you know, things like that, you know, and I think that it's just kind of like, I think that the old ways of us putting the kid in front of the television and just letting them go is old and outdated now. I mean, you know, okay, little TV is going to kill them, but you know, still make sure you're not showing them things that they shouldn't be watching at this young age.
Exactly. There's nothing wrong with that. And reading, sitting with them and
Yeah,
reading
we
a
read a
book,
lot too.
anything that you could do like that. And, you know, I tell people all the time, it doesn't have to be big, extravagant things. It could be just the everyday cooking dinner together, spending time in the car together. And that's where the bonding and attachment forms. And
Yeah.
that's where the communication lines are.
All right, Karen, I'm going to ask you a question, okay?
Sure.
Now, there's a thing I've been doing recently about asking my guests. If your mental health had a song, what would it be?
Um, that's actually interesting because I have a whole mental health list that I play.
Okay, so what's on
The
that mental health
the
list then?
first one that comes to my mind is by Kesha, and the name of the song is Praying. It's a pop song. So that one is very much. The other one that I like is Unstoppable. I
Okay.
think that's but I forgot who that's by. Seer, I think it is. I just love that message of being unstoppable.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's interesting when you ask me that question though, because so far when I got Michael Jackson beat it from a woman who was from the Middle East somewhere. She said Michael Jackson's beat it. I was laughing hysterically. I was like, you did not see that coming whatsoever. I was like, what the hell? You know, it's interesting too because I actually coined the term from a friend of mine who runs a podcast called "The Shit That Goes On in Our Heads."
Mhm.
She said that's what she asked me that same question, and my response, I was like, it depends. My anxiety, you know, it depends on the days and what it is. It's something usually just completely out of control. You know, if I really had to think about it, I think what did I respond? I responded, well, there's this movie called Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. I don't remember the band, but the beginning of it's just that guitar riff, that's just complete chaos is what it's like in my head. You
Mhm.
know, and then the days that I'm depressed, it's Leave a Light On, Tuck Away the Dark by Papa Roach. Now the video itself, it says the suicide hotline at the end of it, which is really powerful because I think it's great because they're really big into mental health. I know the lead singer is very much into it, and it's interesting to see the video as it goes on, you know, and it's at the end it says, you know, if somebody needs help and anything like that. It's such a powerful message because not a lot of people realize that 988 can be called for any reason. You don't just need it if you're suicidal, just call if you need help. I mean, that's a great resource now that a lot of people, you know, they changed the number actually. So they went to 98 because it was easier than dialing all those numbers,
Yes.
obviously,
Yeah.
you know, and things like that too. But I thought that was so interesting because I was like, well, damn, that's a good question. What is it? What is the song? You know, or what is the other thing my friend and I do all the time? She'll message me, hey, what's the song going on in your head right now? You know, what's playing on repeat right now? And I'm just like, I send back some interesting messages to her, depending on what it is. If I'm down, it's just certain things, you know, depending on how high my depression is, the songs can get a little warped by the answers, but you know, was it Cliche by MGK was a really big one that was the last few weeks. Another one by this guy named Swaco does is called POS, and you know, it was just like, I don't know why it came to mind, but it was just like, she's like, that's an interesting cover, and it's like a guy in a ski mask with a cigarette coming out. She's like, that's very interesting. And she doesn't know what to say to that because you know, she's like, okay.
But you know what? Music is so powerful.
It
It
is.
could bring us up or it could bring us down, depending on
It
what
is.
we're listening to.
I agree. I do. And it's great
Yeah.
that, there's a bunch of bands out there. We actually had a couple on the show. One of them, that's what a lot of their songs were about, mental health itself, and a lot of his struggles and things like that. I know a lot of Bush songs were kind of like that too, a lot of the struggles he went through and
Yeah.
things like that, and it was interesting when you're listening to it. I was like, I never really thought about thinking about the lyrics until my wife said something to me. She's like, you ever think about what the lyrics mean? She's like, really listen to what they're talking about when they're doing it. And I was like, that's a really good point. I probably should stop listening to some of these depressing songs, but it's like, it's like I'm a sucker for, like, in the 90s, it was Stained, and it was
Yeah.
like, it was so interesting because it was like, it was so up and down and kind of like the Deftones a little bit too, like some songs were just really intense and other songs were really mellow.
Yeah.
And that's the best way to describe anxiety kind of to people. Well, it's that, or it's the movie Get Out, the scene in the end, the movie, the guy sitting in the chair and you could see reality and everything around you is that darkness that you're trying to escape, and sometimes when it got that bad effect, it was what it was like. You could see reality, but you couldn't touch reality. So when you start panicking, the walls start closing in on you, and then you're trapped in this space in your mind. And when people start asking you, hey, what's wrong? I never really answered, and I just say nothing's wrong, because like 90% of people I know don't understand what's going on. There are very few people in my life that do understand these things, and they know how to identify if something's wrong and things like that too. And I think I think people should educate themselves more on these kind of things, just because you can understand that, how you handle these situations could be the difference in the outcome, because when people start
Absolutely.
panicking, when you start panicking, that's not a good thing. Let me tell you, you start freaking out, telling people to relax, or tell you, oh, hey, listen, just stop thinking when you're having anxiety, when your anxiety kicks up. Yeah, it doesn't work like that. When you're depressed, hey, cheer up. Yeah, it doesn't work like that either, unfortunately. And it's funny to hear people's responses when they say these things to you, because you're thinking the whole time, you're like, I know you're mean well, but I think you need to stop talking right now. Unfortunately, like, you need to stop because you're not helping.
You're not helping me at all. If I
You're
could just
making it
relax or
worse.
cheer up, I would have already.
Right? I'm like, I just need you to stop talking and stop asking me questions. It is always funny too when people try and talk to you, because in your head you have that self-dialogue, like, okay, yep, yeah. And you're like, you just don't get it. And it's you smile at them and they don't realize that's what you're smiling about. You're not smiling because they're talking, you're smiling because you're like, yeah, I appreciate you trying, but you just don't get it. And I can tell you don't get it. And like, hey, continue though, proud of you for trying. I know it sounds so messed up when you say it out loud, but it's like, it boggles my mind. But at the same time, people know that I do this podcast. I've had so many interesting interactions here with people that they've come up to me and said, hey, listen, I know you deal with these kind of things, so I can talk to you about these subjects. And I'm like, okay, cool.
The
It,
problem, the problem with that is everyone's anxiety looks or feels different.
yes, and
You know
100%
what I
correct.
mean? Like people might have the same, like both people could come in and be like, oh, I have anxiety. Oh, I have anxiety. But when we really look at what does your anxiety look like? How does it
Hmm.
manifest itself? How would the people important to you know that you're feeling anxious right now? They could look very different from each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I agree. And I think that's a really good point, that it shows up in different people in different ways. And that's the
Yeah.
great thing about the shows. When people come on, everybody explains their different situations and what they deal with, and things like that. It gets interesting because it's like, it's from their perspective. Like BPD, if you ask like 5 different people, each person experiences it in a different way.
Yeah.
We'd had a musician for a band called Hunter that came on, didn't have an idea she had it, but she was explaining it way differently than somebody else I had come on explaining their experience with it too. And I think it's so fascinating. And the great thing about the show is that you get these people that come on, you get their firsthand encounters. Like, you could read a book all day, let's be honest,
Yeah.
but textbook wise, you're not going to see the same exact things going on,
Yeah.
or you're not going to see or hear the same things. It's not going to, they're going to be very similar in ideals of what's going on, but at the same time, everyone experiences it different. And she did too. She was like, every day I question myself. Now, that may not be the same experience for everyone else that has it,
Yeah.
but that's really what's a great thing about the show is that we can highlight that the fact that everybody may have the same issues, but everybody experiences it in a different way.
And with borderline, that usually comes, there are studies that show that there's a hereditary trait to borderline, But what they're also realizing is that the complex PTSD we were talking about brings that out in people.
Mm-hmm.
So that, the kind of what comes first, the chicken or the egg kind of conversation. And borderline presents differently across the board, just like everything presents differently.
Yeah.
That's why it's good to work with a therapist long term, so that they get to know you and get to know your patterns and can really challenge some of the different beliefs or some of the different behaviors, and look at it and be like, well, why don't we try this instead? And let's see how that goes. And that's why long term work works better than any of those online platforms.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, Karen, as we get ready to start wrapping up, do you want to go ahead and let people know where they can find you? I know you're on Instagram, TikTok. Do you have a website they can go to in case they want to
I
reach out?
I do. My website is KD Tesoriero. So that's TESORIERO, LCSW.net. You can find me on TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, all the socials. And I put out different videos about mental health related things all the time. And like I said, I also do psychotherapy, and I have a life coaching business that I can help people with.
Well, that's awesome, Karen. Thanks so much for being here. I appreciate you reaching out to me. It's so a pleasure having you here. I think I enjoyed the conversation,
Me
honestly.
too.
Anytime we can talk about it and get new voices into the crowd of the conversation, mental health in general is great. Guys, I'll have everything listed down below in the
Awesome.
comment section below this, so that everybody can reach out to Karen if you'd like to. If you're listening to this on the audio side, it'll be the same thing. I'll have it on there, And guys, this is going to wrap up this episode of Pete for Society. You know where to find me. I'm X all the way down to TikTok. I'm on Spotify all the way down to iHeartRadio. And as I always say, it costs nothing, absolutely nothing to be kind to somebody. One kind act you can do can save someone's life, or hell, you can make their day. I Pete for Society saying, hey, don't ask how your day is today. Say, hey, how's your mental health today?